I'm seeing the firefight happening. There's flashes, there's smoke. I can see Baghdad getting closer. I've got this master caution light flashing at me. My panel's lit up like a Christmas tree, so I look up at the hydraulic gauges and they're at 0, which is why I can't control the airplane.
Losing control of that bad boy.
Shooting the gun for the first time in the A-10 is when you actually feel like you're an A-10 pilot. You roll in, point right at the target, you call in, and then stabilize and pull the trigger. The gun shakes, you can smell the gun gas, and then ideally you see like little sparkles on a metal target, and it's instant satisfaction.
That
it's
is
full body
sick.
experience. My name is Kim Casey Campbell. I recently retired from the Air Force after 24 years of service.
Over here is Colonel retired Kim Casey Campbell. Colonel Campbell was a
24 years,
A-10
mad.
pilot with over 1,800 flight hours and more than 100 combat missions. Please join me in welcoming her.
I decided that I was going to be a fighter pilot after watching the Space Shuttle Challenger accident. I was so connected to the fact that these astronauts died doing something that they believed in, something bigger than themselves, and realized that most of the pilots come out of the Air Force Academy. And so that was my plan. I was going to go to the Air Force Academy, become a fighter pilot, and then ideally I had this goal someday of becoming an astronaut. I think this was my room when I was a 4 degree. This was it. So many memories, although there were 3 of us in this room, so it looks a lot different, but this is definitely the room. It's very competitive, but at the same time, we learned very early on that if we don't work together, we're not going to succeed. After graduation, I got the opportunity to get my private pilot's license, and then finally went off to Air Force pilot training. I found out very quickly I really loved the low-level missions in pilot training, but this idea of close air support and helping our troops get home safely to their families, I mean, that was something I could get on board with.
And the troops all love the A-10 for that reason. They've got this special connection, the troops and the A-10 pilots.
I want to be a fighter jet pilot now.
Help yourself.
How do I apply?
Guys, guide us in the comment section. Fats is going to apply, all right?
To me, the A-10 was the perfect choice. So this is the A-10 Warthog.
Wow.
This one
Beautiful.
is a little bit different than the ones that I have flown because this is the original paint scheme on the A-10. It's green instead of the gray airplanes that I flew. It was designed to take hits while performing its mission of close air support. So you can see that it has 2 very reliable engines in the back there. And then also the fuel tanks, both in the wings and then in the fuselage, are enclosed in this protective foam lining to prevent fire after battle damage. Perhaps most loved by the pilots is that up there in the cockpit, the pilot actually sits in what we call a titanium bathtub. The A-10 was designed to take so many hits while performing its mission.
Wow.
It's good that they put titanium because, as we know, it's the most strong metal you can find. So, and it's light as well. So it's a good combination. So the pilots must feel very protected and assured knowing that they're wrapped in titanium almost. It's good.
September
sad,
11th,
isn't it?
2001, obviously the world changed forever. My life as an A-10 pilot, my life as an Air Force officer was going to change dramatically. I went from training in the A-10 to 9/11 happening to deploying to Afghanistan all within a span of about 6 months.
Damn.
I spent my first time as a wingman in Afghanistan flying combat missions, supporting troops on the ground, doing exactly what we had been trained to do. We flew in Afghanistan for several months. Everything we were hearing, all the talk on the news, was an impending situation in Iraq. And so it was like come home from one deployment and then just prep for the next. We didn't know if we were going to be the unit that was called upon to go. We had just gotten home from Afghanistan and we got the call that it was us by March.
Imagine that you just come from Afghanistan, which must have been a crazy experience, like as a pilot, you know, doing the missions that they're setting you to do. You're finally like relieved that you survived it, you're alive, you know, you're happy.
And you're on the next mission now.
Go to Iraq straight after. Fuck.
You know what? A massive applaud to Kim, because I feel like a lot of people feel a certain type of way in terms of women being in the military and in terms of like, you know, men, you're not about your emotions, whereas women, we are more
Emotional, yeah.
So, you know, what made her want to become a pilot is that, you know, she felt a type of way about the accident of the spaceship, and that motivated her to become a pilot. And it just shows how focused she is on her job and how far she went as well.
Yeah, she killed it. 24 years is
Yeah.
astonishing for any career. Like, she's done so well.
She's a bad.
First, 2003, we were back on the ground in Kuwait, prepping for Operation Iraqi Freedom. When I landed in Kuwait, I knew immediately that things were different. We were the last A-10 unit to arrive, and so the ramp was just covered with A-10s, with other fighter aircraft, with rescue helicopters. I mean, as far as you could see, it was really clear to us that this war was coming. When we found out that we were going to be doing close air support over downtown Baghdad, I mean, that was eye-opening for me. Baghdad was surrounded by what we called the Super MES, the Super Missile Engagement Zone. This was going to be nothing like Afghanistan in terms of the threat. There were so many missions to fly. We had very little downtime. Every day was a bit of a grind. During Operation Iraqi Freedom, I flew almost every day. 5 times a week, we would fly missions, and sometimes we would fly multiple missions in a day. Just push that aside because you know there are troops on the ground, and they're exhausted, they're working hard. What we were dealing with really paled in comparison to what they were going through. On April 7th, 2003, we were tasked to do what we have been doing many days throughout the war, which was provide close air support. At this point, our troops had moved all the way to Baghdad, and the resistance had increased. There was a lot more calls for close air support, troops in contact missions. We would fly up to Baghdad. We would air refuel, so we were full of gas, and then we could wait in these stacks to hold. We would stack airplanes up around Baghdad, and you would wait in the stack until you got a call. So aircraft would just kind of flow out to go do a mission.
That's so mad. So they'll stack in the air waiting because they know a call's going to come any second. Rather than being in the loading bay or whatever, or the parking bay, they're just ready in the air because it's that busy. That is nuts. Crazy.
They're prepared.
Yeah.
The only thing that was a little different this day was that the weather was terrible. Couldn't see the ground below. In an A-10 at the time, we had to be able to get below the weather. Talking with my flight lead, we just kind of thought, well, we may not be able to do anything today. The clouds are so bad that we may not be able to get below the weather. And then we got a call for close air support. So at this point in Baghdad, our ground troops were trying to secure major lines of communication. The ground troops had moved so quickly that a lot of them were waiting on supplies, waiting on ammunition as well. So it was just a very intense time on the ground. When we got the call for close air support, we were told that our friendly troops, the 3rd Infantry Division, were actually awaiting resupply of some ammunition and supplies, but they were taking fire. They had been hunkered down on the west side of the Tigris River. The enemy, which in this case was the Iraqi Republican Guard, was on the east side of the river, firing rocket-propelled grenades into our troops. We got the call to go in and take out the enemy that was hiding underneath what we called at the time the North Baghdad Bridge. We had to try to figure out how to get below the weather. We proceeded immediately over the target location and just figured we would find a hole in the weather and we would get down below.
Imagine how difficult that must be because you can't see below, but you know you need to go because if you don't, you're losing a lot. There's a lot of lives at stake. These are real people. This ain't a computer game. So they need to find a way because they're going to lose all their colleagues and troops.
But this is a skill that you have to have. You have to be able to make, quick decisions. You have to be able to work under pressure.
Yeah, lots of
These
pressure.
are skills that you need to have when you're working in the military.
And I'm sure the training they go through prepares them for situations like this.
Yeah.
But it seems like even for her, it's quite extreme, despite her just coming back from the previous mission.
What we would find when we got down below the weather. But I remember my flight lead, he very quickly told me that we would be wedge shooters guns, which was our formation, that we would both be shooting and we would be using guns.
Oh, here we go.
Yes, the adrenaline is pumping, but how do we get in there as fast as we can? We were in this formation and I looked over at my flight lead and he just rolled inverted and disappeared through the weather. He
Wow.
popped out down below the clouds and he said, "All right, Casey, it's your turn." And so looked down, found a hole in the clouds and dove through. When we got down below the weather, it was very surreal to see the smoke and the tracers just going back and forth across the river. I mean, it was eye-opening to me. It was the first time that I had been that low to see the firefight and know that our troops were taking fire. My flight lead is moving very quickly. He decides that he is going to set up for an attack. He's going to come in north to south so that he can point right underneath the bridge to take out the enemies. I'm in a position about a mile behind him. He rolls in, gets cleared hot, pulls the trigger, and 30 millimeter down on the enemy location. A few seconds later, we hear the call, abort, abort, abort. It turns out it's not effective coming in from that direction. The ground controller tells us you've got to come in from south to north.
North 75 meters.
So now we're pretty predictable. We really now can only come in from one direction. We're going to come in from the south, and then we're going to go off to the west so that we can be over the friendly location. We start to get set up again, and about this time, I'm seeing the firefight happening. There's flashes, there's smoke, and then about that time, I can see something out of my cockpit. It's these puffs of gray and white smoke and a flash, and I realize not only is there this firefight happening across the river, but now the enemy is shooting up at us too.
Yep. They're saying we need to get rid of these A-10s because they're about to take us out. So they're keen. They're probably going to start using like anti-aircraft missiles and stuff like that. I wouldn't be surprised.
We acknowledge it, we talk about it, we continue with our attack. We're low, we're slow, we're fully loaded with weapons and gas, and so we're heavy. It's a very high threat situation for us. We each do 2 passes. We use gun. And then we also use high explosive rockets.
Oh.
Really just trying to use forward firing ordnance to get below the bridge as we're shooting. And then I set up for my last rocket pass. My last rocket pass now, we've been in the target area for a little bit. We're a little slower and lower than we'd like to be, but again, we're taking risks because of the troops on the ground. I'm just doing my best to make sure I can hit the target. I roll in, point my nose right underneath the bridge, try to fine-tune everything. I hit the pickle button, which is our weapons release button, and immediately pull away from the ground and away from the threat. That's when I just feel and hear this loud explosion at the back of the airplane. There's a red-orange fireball that envelops the aircraft, feeling like a car crash, throwing me in the airplane, knocks the jet over to the point that it's looking over to the left, looking down at Baghdad. I immediately pull back on the control stick and absolutely nothing happens.
No, engine out.
And everything, all the training, everything that you do up to this point, even though sometimes it's frustrating, even though sometimes it's painful, you have to be prepared for that moment. Because the preparation matters. Because when the situation demands it, you have to be prepared to execute. I'm breathing rapidly because I'm scared. I don't really know what's going on. I can see Baghdad getting closer. I've got this master caution light flashing at me. My panel's lit up like a Christmas tree, so I look up at the hydraulic gauges and they're at 0, which is why I can't control the airplane. I have 2 choices. I can eject, which doesn't sound very good. If I had come down on the east side of the Tigris River, where the enemy was, I think I would have immediately been captured. Who knows if I would have survived.
Held for hostage, ransom, all of that, and then pretty much they'll probably kill her as well because she's such a asset to the US with what her talent. They'll probably just get her off.
Yeah.
I help also this backup emergency system called manual reversion. It's designed to fly the aircraft without hydraulics. It's old school cranks, cables, and pulleys that allow you to fly the aircraft under this mechanical mode. I remember flipping that switch and just feeling such a sense of relief.
She's lucky they had it.
I pull back on the stick and the airplane starts to climb up and away from Baghdad.
Ooh.
Made a radio call to my flight lead and told him that I was hit. I was so focused on flying the airplane, but he had this awareness of like, the enemy's still shooting at us. He told me chaff flare, trying to get me to put out more chaff and flare so I wouldn't get hit again. He also told me to go west. In my mind, I'm like, I'm just trying to control the airplane, but he's trying to get me to go west so that if I have to eject, at least I have some chance of survival to float down in my parachute over the friendly location. As soon as I told him that I was in manual reversion, he knew how severe the situation was. He immediately told me to jettison all my ordnance so that I could climb. We don't know how long I'm going to be able to keep flying the airplane. My flight lead rejoins with me pretty quickly to do a battle damage check. And he tells me there's hundreds of holes. A hole about the size of a football in the horizontal stabilizer and hundreds of holes in the fuselage and tail section. None of it.
Not gonna lie, as sad as it is, they got some good accuracy because that the A-10 moves. So for them to be landing shots, I guess it's because she was so low.
And she did say that they were flying slower than they
Yeah,
wanted
because
to
they were
as well.
heavy.
So that's probably why it was easier for them to aim.
Look at that damage.
Yeah.
What the hell?
It sounds good. I was surprised that after everything he said, the airplane is still flying. I had enough fuel and decided to fly all the way back to Kuwait.
Yeah, get
1
out
hour
of there.
flight time, about 300 miles from Baghdad. I know you guys have questions. You can ask about anything.
So what exactly is manual reversion? Like, how does the system work?
So manual reversion is just simply cranks, cables, and pulleys that allow you to fly the aircraft under mechanical or manual mode without hydraulics. So it's kind of like old school flying, like think right back to Wright brothers flying. Not many aircraft have it, and it's physically exhausting to fly that airplane home. I've heard other pilots that talk about flying in manual reversion, and they say it's like driving a dump truck or a semi-truck without power steering. The thing here is it's heavy, right? It's hard to fly. At the same time, I am very aware of all the manual reversion landings that have happened before mine, because there were only 3 of them, and sadly not all of them were successful. The first pilot in Desert Storm that attempted to land in manual reversion was killed on landing. The second pilot was able to get the airplane on the ground, but then swerved on and off the runway several times due to lack of brakes and steering. And then there was this third situation, manual reversion landing, with very similar damage to mine. And this pilot was able to get the airplane on the ground safely. So it was like this glimmer of hope, right, that I could do this too. I remember
Imagine if all 3 of them died, she would have been like, I'm basically, in her head, she's obviously going to try, but in her head, there will be 0 hope. So she's
100%. But because there was that third person that did manage to land successfully, she thought, okay, I can do it. I have to do it.
Let's see.
Flight lead saying, Casey, you're going to have to decide if you want to stay with the jet or jump out. I had flown in manual reversion just once before this in our initial training. I knew about stories of pilots that had come before me. It was, I don't know, the longest hour of my life, I would say. You know, I think in flying back, I'm human. You know, my mind wanders and I do think about the worst case scenario. I remember thinking like my husband and I had just gotten married fairly recently. We hadn't spent a lot of time together because we had been deployed. I hadn't had kids yet. It was like I was thinking about all these things in life that I still wanted to do.
I think because she knows she might die here, it was like a reality check of her personal life. Yeah, it's sad.
And all of a sudden I also realized that death was a real possibility. Like I knew there was a possibility that I might not make it.
Sad, so sad.
But I realized I couldn't stay there. I couldn't just dwell on all the terrible things that could happen, and I had to compartmentalize it. And if I was going to land this airplane successfully, I had to 100% be focused on that. We eventually got back into Kuwait, but I knew it was also decision time. And I felt like in my gut that I could land this airplane. I remember pulling that handle to get the gear to come down, and it just felt like the longest wait to see those 3 green lights telling me the gear are down and locked. We're approaching the airfield now. It's completely hazy. I'm having a hard time just picking up the runway. We're talking to the tower controllers at Al Jaber. I get lined up for final approach and kind of take that deep breath because it's now or never. I've got to go forward with my decision to land the airplane. My flight lead asked if I wanted to continue, and I said yes. At about 60 feet, I got just over the landing threshold, and I just felt this immediate roll, and I thought the airplane was going to flip over on its back. My heart just skips a beat where I'm thinking of so many things of what could happen. It's muscle memory now. I just yank the stick back and the airplane levels out. 30 feet, now it's just this small prayer that's like, please let me make it. The main gear hit and the nose gear.
Good landing as well.
I've yet to come up with a word. Relief seems so inadequate. I mean, it was just this deep relief of being on the ground and like knowing that I had survived this. Rolling.
And she is officially the 4th now who has attempted to land in that mode. And out of the 4, only 2 were successful, her and the previous guy.
So there is definitely hope for the future pilots.
That's it.
Hopefully they're not in that situation, but if they are, they've got hope.
It is bound to happen one day, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And at least this is a historical moment for them to look back, and because they're going to learn all about it and, help them.
Rolling forward, I'm hearing all the guys from my squadron on the radio, and they're just welcoming me home, and I'm so relieved. And then I hear my flight lead from overhead say, all right, Casey, you can stop the airplane now. I'm surrounded by fire trucks at this point. I hop out of the airplane, and walking to the back of the airplane and seeing that damage was just, it was shock. It was just overwhelming. Just a true testament to the durability of the A-10.
I was literally going to say that the A-10 is known and famously known for the durability, and here's a prime example as to why people like the A-10 so strong.
The wing commander, the person in charge of all of us, met me at the airplane, and he had a car, so he asked me where I wanted to go. He said, I think I need to go see my crew chief. Those crew chiefs, right, they're assigned to an airplane, and it's their baby. They're responsible for it, and so they feel attached to it.
Seeing the
whole way
damage.
over, I'm trying to figure out, how do I apologize to my crew chief for destroying his airplane? I remember pulling into the parking spot, and my crew chiefs that day were Senior Airman Randy Andrus and Staff Sergeant Ian Morris. I just remember, I open up the door, and I look up at Ian, and he's just got this huge smile on his face. Grabs my hand, and he says, ma'am, welcome home. We're glad you're safe. This mission on April 7th was a defining moment in my life. I got to prove myself in combat very early in my career. I was certainly pushed to my absolute limit, but it also allowed me to help influence the next generation of pilots. I got asked to do a lot of interviews, and I didn't want to do any of them. To me, there was a war going on, could we just not talk about it? I turned down as many as I could. And then finally, someone said to me, you could make a difference in the lives of young girls if you would do some of these interviews, that this is something that they can do too. And I was like,
She told me the KC stands for Killer Chick. KC, who flies an A-10,
love that.
also known as a warthog, was involved in a harrowing mid-air ambush over the skies of Baghdad.
To talk and share the story, and to have these young girls come up to me was a solid reminder that it wasn't about me. It was never about me. It was, about sharing the story to help other people.
So that was KC's story in the A-10.
Killer chick.
I could already tell by your reaction how quiet you were. You were really into that. But quick run over your thoughts just briefly.
Oh, massive round of applause to her. And I feel like maybe she didn't want to do the interviews because she was traumatized by what just happened, and she just wasn't ready to speak about it. And the fact that her colleague mentioned you can change lives with your story, she thought, okay, you know what? If anyone else was to go through this, I want them to know exactly how I dealt with it. Yes, you do think about death.
Yeah, 100%.
It's a life or death situation, but I think it's her way of educating, like she said, the next generation.
She might have saved a life by doing it.
Yeah.
And there could be or could have been a situation like that we don't know about recently, and that KC story and training might have saved their life.
Yeah.
Just don't know.
100%.
Yeah, incredible. Thank you guys so much for recommending the video. Keep suggesting videos in the comment section, and don't forget to like and subscribe. For now, peace out.
Bye.